We start with this. The Public Service Commission wants the public sector professionalized. It believes this will make it a more efficient sector, able to deliver services. It will also lift the bureaucracy out of the clutches of crooked politicians and the so-called mafia. Let's discuss this now with the Commission's chair, Somadoda Fikeni. Thank you so much for your time. Let's perhaps start with why you believe it is important that the sector is professionalized.
Thank you very much for inviting me. In the very first instance, the quality of any democracy is judged by the service that the state is able to provide. Provide for the citizens, for the business sector, for civil society, for those coming from outside. If the state institutions, especially your public sector, which is what many people on average interface with, has weaknesses, is not professionalized, you are going to see one of the following things. There will be poor service delivery, and therefore service delivery protests. There will be poor security and law enforcement. There will be a lot of corruption, rampant corruption. There will be poor implementation of policies, and there will be poor investment environment or even efficiency of the state itself. So the sum total performance of the state depends on professionalizing public service. Hence, there are many studies that came in. There was in 1997 a presidential review which called for professionalization. Just fast forward, there was Kada's parliamentary report which called for professionalization of the state. And there was National Development Plan in its Chapter 13. After its issuance in 2014, it called for professionalization. But at that time, there was no urgency in trying to realize this because the state was not in a bad shape. The crises were not as obvious. Now with the Zondo Commission and other corruption reports, with insecurity at high levels, load shedding, the rail and freight challenges and so forth, we're beginning to realize that the number one area to focus is to build the state capacity at all levels.
Prof, many would say we are already at a state where there's poor service delivery and really the public's trust in the public service has just really diminished. Talk to me about what the road to professionalization would look like and whether you believe this would help to restore the public's trust in public service.
There is no other way but to implement in earnest the professionalization framework if we are to restore that trust, because the trust is earned. You must demonstrate that you can deliver. One of many things that will happen is it looks at the whole ecosystem. Who do we recruit into the public service? The filters, where there'll be a panel of experts, even if you are appointing your HODs, even if you are appointing your DGs, your DDGs, and so forth. And you have your integrity test and many other filters to make sure that a person who has done wrong in one province doesn't reappear in another province to just get another job. So that's the first thing in the recruitment process. Then once you have people who are in the system, there is a need of unlearning and relearning these new professional values and principles, as well as ethos and technical skills. That's where the National School of Government, the universities and so forth come in now to do that intensive training, a deep immersion to that effect. There is also in the same professionalization document and other legislative reforms which are taking place, a clear delineation of roles which is defining the interface between politics and administration, because that has been one of the problems, to make sure that there are no unlawful instruction, there is no diffusion of accountability, there is clarity as to who is doing what. And on top of that, the issue of consequence management, performance management It's one of many things that professionalization of the public service is going to be doing. And therefore, there is an overhauling of public service as we know it now, where competence instead of loyalty is going to be key, where integrity and ethics are going to be central in the work that is being done. And generally the reorientation of how we perceive performance so that it is mainly focused on the impact on society rather than people just working towards compliance alone.
Prof, this does sound that it will have a very positive impact on service delivery. What then are some of the stumbling blocks, if any, to the implementation of this professionalization framework?
Right now, we're working on the implementation framework. We've asked the United Nations Development Program. We're working with several other entities which can do and bring their experience from around the world. Because in South Africa, we've had instances where very good policies don't get implemented. So that's the first positive thing that we're trying to do. And many departments, many role players, Parliament, everybody realize that this is the real crux of everything, since this is priority number one. The only challenge that could come along is the kind of resistance in terms of slowing the process down. Even worse, now that we're going to elections, you may find that this is pushed into the back burner as political parties are jostling for, ascendance to power. And this is a matter of national interest that one would want to believe that it should be a priority. The other problem that normally happens in our country is leadership and it's leadership turnover. Once a leader leaves, we start afresh. There is no institutional memory. There is no sense of saying, let's take from where we left. So those are some of the things in the horizon which may slow things down. The other thing, it's the fragmentation. When one department is to implement certain segments, because professionalization framework touches on local government, which means COGTA as well as SALGA ought to be on board, do something. Certain regulations have to be issued by the Department of Public Service and Administration. They are already working on that. Certain things will have to be done by the National School of Government, by the Public Service Commission, and by the Parliament. Where now the challenge comes, legislations, just crafting a bill, consultations and so forth, where legislations have to be changed, it takes a long time. And sometimes because of mutual suspicions by civil society, by different political parties, it takes an awful long time to implement some of this.
Thank you so much for your time. Insightful and thought-provoking conversation this morning. That was the chair of the Public Service Commission, Professor Somadoda Fikeni. I'm also very intrigued by that leadership turnover that you pointed out, as it leads me to the question of succession plans in the public service. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time.